All right, 3, 2, 1. All right. Ross Taylor, welcome to Laugh and Learn with Vern. It's good to see you. I come to your drop-in classes all the time.
Yeah. You're one of my loyal cadre. There's a few of you.
It's good. We learn stuff. One of the reasons I reach out to you is because you're very candid, not only about giving feedback.
Yeah.
You also are candid about the improv industry. You've worked in Chicago, New York, all over, and we have New Year's resolutions coming up. That's
Yeah.
how I got started a couple years ago. I'm sure you'll have people that are going to be looking to, try improv, and you're kind of doing it on your own. So, Ross, what would be something you tell someone who's like, I think I'm kind of funny, but I don't know if I should make the plunge? What would you say?
I'd say try it out. You'll probably enjoy it. And if you don't, it's only one time. That the risk of trying is so small, like a couple hours, it's never so bad. The anticipation is much worse than the doing of it. And usually, if that person is not in the theater already, it's a different kind of conversation. But if it's like after a show and often people will come after a show and be like, hey, I really admire what you do. I could never do it. I could never do it. But it's like, that's a much easier place to be like, you should just sign up for a class. It's really easy, low risk. Like you're only out your time and a little bit of money. So it's very easy to do and low embarrassment.
How do you make people comfortable when they are in one of your classes and they're like, hey, I've never done this before?
Yeah, I mean, I love those beginners classes with people it's their very first like moments of improv. Because generally they're very scared or nervous. And so projecting confidence and ease, making them feel very comfortable just by being a comfortable person to be around is usually a big thing. Is like if you project easygoing energy, then they tend to relax a little more. I lead them along and don't try to over-explain anything. Just get them doing exercises right away so that they don't... Because at the beginning, if you're like, all right, we're about to change your life. You're going to learn yes and next you're going to... It's like you can just... Too much information. So we'll get up right away. Be like, all right, let's circle up. We're going to start out. You're going to turn to this person on your left. You're going to clap hands at the same time. Right, now that person's going to turn to their partner on their left, also clap hands at the same time and pass around this circle. It's like we get the clap going around and then we'll lead to the next thing and then the next thing. And after we do the exercise, I may explain a little. Like, all right, in this last one, that's not improv, but we are agreeing to participate with the same rules. And I'm not here to surprise you. I'm here to meet you at the same time and wait until I'm sure we're going to clap at the same time because of the ensemble spirit. It's not just me being a star. It's both. So there's all this stuff that I've gotten used to because I've done that intro class like hundreds of times. So my 2 hours is tight. I know exactly what I'm doing with those. But I love people letting down their guard for the first time and getting a laugh for the first time. Usually pretty cool. But you don't reach everybody. There's a lot of people who don't come back and try it out after that. So it's like, not for everybody.
What do you say to someone who's like, yeah, I kind of want to do improv, but I don't know. Is it like, should I only do improv in person? Can I do it over Zoom? I mean, obviously I'm biased because I attend your classes and I have a great time. It's one of the reasons I asked you on. Mm-hmm. What do you say to people that think like, I don't know about this whole Zoom thing?
Usually if you have an absolute beginner who's willing to do online improv, then they are going to go to the largest institution. They will type in improv class, and whatever comes up at the top is what they're going to take. So it's like Second City has a big advantage in this area, or the other theaters after that. So I don't get a ton of absolute beginners coming to me because they tend to go to something more trusted. But whenever I work for those places, if they sign up, they're willing at least to do that much. The people who are too scared to even try, I don't communicate with because they don't sign up for those experiences. I do love it whenever people, like I've had a few people, I used to try the Google ads at the very beginning of my Ross Taylor teaching thing, and I did get a few people to sign up that way, but not as committed. I mean, if you get a free opportunity to do stuff, you're somehow less committed than if you pay $10 for the class. Like they're more, I don't know, I found less success in getting brand new students to take my independent teaching kind of course.
I want to get into that. are on your own. I mean, I remember the first time I think I met you was, I want to say you were, I did a tryout. And it was
Hmm.
one of those, I think it was for, what is it? You know, like you get the 4 show run on like Thursdays at like 11 p.m. What are those called at Second City?
Oh, that was like God, coached ensembles is
Coach,
one. There's
Coach Ensemble.
something like that. Yeah.
So it was one of those where you were running the Coach Ensemble tryouts, and you got the 30 people, you know, in the line, and then they split the 2 lines, and then afterwards. And one of the things I liked about you is you were very, kind of like you are now. You're very calm. You're like, hey, and I think one of the first things you said was, you're like, hey, this is really hard, and improv is really hard, and we're all looking for different things. So if you don't get a call back, it doesn't mean you suck.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of helped me, because, well, I think the fact of the matter is, everyone who gets up there is brave, and they need to appreciate themselves and love themselves for
Hmm.
giving a shot like that. You've taken a huge plunge. You are Ross Taylor Improv Inc. How did that get started?
Well, the pandemic forced all the classes I was teaching at Second City to go online. So, week 2 we were in of our 8-week classes, and it was just like, all right, school's closed. We're going to take 1 week off, and then we're going to be doing online classes the following week. If you don't want to do it, totally fine. But we
That
need to
that
know
was
that.
that was it.
That was it. It was
It was,
it.
hey,
So
you're
it was
down.
like, and at first, I was very I was reluctant to believe that it would be a fun experience for anybody involved. As far as like, oh man, I have to be on computers, and I just don't know. I don't think it's going to go well. But then trying it out within a couple hours, it's like, all right, I can see how this could easily translate, how we can easily make it work. It took being forced to do so, because previous to any of this, nobody would have wanted to do so much stuff on Zoom. I mean, it was only because we were forced to do it that we're all okay with it now. But so being forced into it was step one, and then you know, classes started to dwindle and dwindle. It's like we all got less work, and so I was like, well, I was a couple of terms there where I had one class. For 8 weeks, that's 3 hours a week. That's just not enough to make too much money. So I just thought I'd throw out there the old drop-in, or I originally was trying to do group classes, but it just didn't happen. It's like, again, getting a small number of people to commit is not a problem, but getting a large enough group that it's like gonna feel fun, because having like a 5-person class can be really hard if someone misses 1 week or 2 people. It's like it gets really tricky with small numbers. So uh, the drop in, at least on Saturdays, has been pretty good. It's just, goes up and down, and there's no predicting. That's the unfortunate thing about having like a no commitment kind of class, is like sometimes people don't sign up. Sometimes a bunch of people sign up, but at the last minute after, it's like lots of tricky elements. But overall, I've gotten to interact with tons of people. It's like really cool that people like yourself keep coming back. It's because that's what I relate to, as far as whenever I'm a performer, that's the kind of performer I am, where it's like, I want more. I want to do more scenes. If there's an opportunity to drop in once a week, I'm there. So that's kind of what keeps me motivated, is like, well, there's only 5 people signed up for this Saturday, but man, they come every week, and I kind of feel like they're my people, so I'm going to meet them because they're there to meet me. It's kind of like I gain inspiration, and I'm sure that the students would say a similar thing about like, oh, I'm inspired every once in a while you say a thing that's helpful or whatever. So it's very much a mutual reward situation with the teaching. I would not be a good high school teacher. I only want to teach people who are super interested and like in this very specific area.
You've been doing this for over a decade, right? In improv?
Yeah, my improv first time in college was 2003 or 4, something like that. And then my first real class was 2009 in New York at the Magnet. So 11 years going on 12, I guess.
What you said, it inspires you when students will come and they want to learn.
Hmm.
What inspired you? Still perform all the time. What inspired you to get started?
It's just one of so I come from a small town in the rural Missouri, and in my family there's a lot of religious people. There's a lot of like pastors and stuff. And it used to be said that you were called to become a pastor. You just kind of like felt it. It was like, I've always felt that performing was my calling. It's just I just like there's nobody in the middle of Missouri who goes into an arts career, let alone an acting career. So I felt compelled and I followed it ever since. And it's not always been like I don't know. I haven't yet gotten beyond middle class actor, but I haven't lost my fire, and I've seen a lot of people along the way who have, or that life comes along and they start a family or the job or whatever. It's like there's just a million reasons for people to stop performing and get off in another direction, and I've just always kept performing as the thing that I've chosen to do. So that's there was no real moment or anything. It was just like. Uh, Performing in speech and debate and theater in high school and feeling like I was good at it and watching movies and feeling like, man, I think I could do this. And not now, but given enough time if I just devoted my life to it. But there's all sorts of obstacles to, if you don't have anybody in your life who's a member, like a part of the arts community, you're just groping around in the dark trying to figure out like, all right, I'll move to New York, and then you audition and you get the job, and that's how acting works. It's like no, it's much more complicated than that. And to start at 25 in New York is pretty late. If you want to be like a big actor, it really helps to start as like a 12-year-old and have a parent who takes you to auditions and to be born on a coast. Like there's a lot of elements involved, which is like it's just much harder to start at this point. But I don't care. I mean, it's just I think I'll be a really great older actor. I've had trouble getting cast as a younger person because, if you don't look like a thing specifically, it can be hard to cast you. And it's just like, well, you look like a Midwestern person, but, it's like we aren't casting a ton. So I can go out on auditions for like police officer and, like certain things come along, but it's never been like, oh, wow, we've got a million ideas or willing to take a risk, even though you look like this. We'll give you a shot as the villain or whatever. And it's like, I think as I get older, I'll be much more castable personally, especially now as I enter young dad years where it's like, yeah, I'll take that all day.
So you're aiming for like you'll be like the young to like middle-aged dad, or like eventually you can age. Well, maybe like the whole idea is like you do this acting career and it's like so tough that it just ages you so much that you become like bitter and old.
Yeah,
And then you
exactly.
just like fall right in. You can just fall into every one of those old characters that like you could eventually be a sheriff, right? And you can
Yeah, exactly. Oh, a teacher, all the authority figures and stuff like that. Especially, like we males have a slight advantage in that we can get a bunch of wrinkles on our face and still get cast as things without, having to overcome some great bar. So it's like, oh yeah, I'll look like an old man. They're gonna need those. You always need people who actually look old.
You said before you were 25 when you were in New York.
Yeah, that's when I moved to New York.
What was that experience like? Like the first time you moved to New York. Like what got you to do it? I mean, I know you talked about like you said you always wanted to perform.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, I'm from Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing I remember about Missouri, outside of I do like a lot of the people, is I don't understand. And maybe it's different now, but it seems like anytime you drive through Missouri, there's an inordinate amount of porn billboards. There are so many truck drivers that like, is that just why is that?
That's I know it's a Midwestern thing because it's not everywhere. It's just like little nooks and crannies because it's not allowed anywhere else. I think if towns were a little less high strung and could have the random adult store that you wouldn't have like out in the middle of nowhere, the only gas station right next to like Lions Gate, like some weird name.
Lions
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, growing up there, there's just the extremes. It's my belief that like the extreme religious side tends to create this other extreme because there's no in between. You're either headed to heaven or not. So it's kind of like you either get right with God or you get just hard in the other direction. So there's just no, like cities. Even though it's a little seedy in New York to see like an adult store, it's just right next to the subway and it's like everything's together, so it just doesn't feel quite so. I don't know. I would never want to go visit one of those places in Missouri. I have no problem walking into a store in New York. It's like, oh, this is normal. Yeah.
Yeah. Missouri, it's like the one thing for like 5 miles, and you're like, I don't know. I feel like
Small town, people know you, and like all that stuff. I mean, I haven't been home in a long time, so I can pretty much be a stranger in Missouri, but yeah.
it's not at the Lions Den. so you go to New York, you're 25, like you get there. How do you even know what to do? Like you're from the Midwest, you're in
Yeah,
this
yeah.
whole different place. Everything's like super expensive. People are bumping into you. Like what do you do?
Well, one thing. So it's kind of a complicated story. So I didn't graduate college. I got through a bunch of hours, but basically only cared about theater. So I would do those classes and do great, and never go to anything else because I was like, well, that's not theater. I don't need this, and I don't need this. And so basically, I couldn't graduate, and I hung around this town in Columbia, Missouri, where the University of Missouri is, for a couple more years. It's like feeling down, knew I wanted to be an actor. Oh, also, at 20, I had gotten married, and then at 22, I had gotten divorced. So it's just like I was definitely in a place of like, I'm going to do whatever I want with my life. So here's me being an adult. I'm getting married. Well, I'm getting divorced. And now I'm just kind of like not going anywhere. But I got this job working at the library, the university library, and was able to work there for a few years and save up some money. And I moved with the girl that I was dating. So we moved together, and we got an apartment off of Craigslist, got the first job. I mean, interviewing off Craigslist. I just didn't know anything. Just
What was the first
yeah.
job?
It was called the New York City Guitar School, and it's like 40 teachers, located in Manhattan at 29th Street between 7th and 8th. And I was just an office. I mean, in New York, they'll paint any shitty job as like rock star desk assistant. It's like that's what I applied for. Think of it, it's like a rock star assistant at a guitar school. Awesome. But I was really like, my first job, it was $10 an hour, and then after the first year, I got bumped up to like 11. And so just barely, just so broke all the time. Had that job for probably 2 years, but I didn't care because, it's just like all new. And you're like, wow, I get to go into the city every day, and I don't have any money, and I'm losing money, but there's the city. And wow, I'm here. But I knew I was going to get into this place called The Magnet. It is a weird way of like learning about it. A lot of weird stories here. So before I moved, in the months leading up, I was applying to every job on Craigslist that I could find that was like acting jobs. So one of them was somebody claiming to have somehow acquired the rights to the National Lampoon name, the company name, and that they were making a new movie. They're making a college movie about a guy that's like, hung. He's just huge. He's got a big penis. So the submission is just like, send your resume and pictures of you in your underwear. So I'm like, okay, hey, I'm moving to New York. I want to get it in a movie. So I sent these pictures, and this guy sent back, he was like, can you send more pictures? By the way, I see on your resume, Improv, there's this place called the Magnet Theater, and it's small, so if you're good, you can get on stage right away. But also, could you send more pictures? I was like, buried in this pervy thing. I was like, okay. So like on the third day I was in New York, I took the free intro class at the Magnet and signed the only class I ever paid for.
You didn't say if you sent them pictures.
Oh yeah, I did. I mean, again, green, just totally like, well, the guy asked for it, so okay.
It'd be weird if I didn't send pictures.
Yeah. Then it happened again, and then I was like, you know what? I don't think this is real. I don't think this is fake. Well, you just kept being like, I just need some more.
I'll send pictures of your feet too.
And I was like, okay, all right, but yeah, that's how I started. I took my first class at the Magnet. Well, because again, my limited knowledge, like I checked out all the improv books I could get through the library, and one of them, the second book, there was the Sharna Del Close. First one's Truth and Comedy. Second one is called Comedy by Committee, and it came with a DVD in the back. And the DVD had like Ass Cat from UCB, this thing called Beer Shark Mice from Chicago, this thing called the Armando Diaz Experience. And so I was like, oh, Armando, he owns the Magnet. I've heard of that. And so there's like, this guy must be somebody. So like, that's why I signed up at the Magnet. because that makes no sense. The UCB is the biggest thing in New York by far. Like, if I had Google searched improv classes, UCB would have come up first. But uh,
You
yeah.
said the one book you found was by the founder of the magnet.
Oh no, it's just that on this DVD included in the second Del Clore Charlotte Halpern improv book, there was a group that performed the Armando Diaz Experience, which was just a form, but that name stuck in my brain. And so later, whenever I saw that this was a man who owned this theater, it was like, oh, okay, I've heard of that. So this is legit. And so that's why I signed up there. But yeah, now I still teach classes there. So it's incredible.
What are some? So you go to the magnet. This is like your first like improv theater experience, right? Like you're in New
Mm-hmm.
York. This is like improv. What's it like? I'm assuming you started with group classes. Did you start with like an intro to improv?
Yeah, initially it was just a 2 hour intro, and then after that I signed up for a level one, and then I mean I just didn't have much money in my account at that time, so that was the only one that I paid for. I immediately became an intern there and was there like every Friday night doing box office and selling behind the bar, and eventually it was being a tech in the booth. But every Friday night or every night you would spend there was one like class credit day. So if you do 8 weeks, then you get that class. So I paid for all my classes that way. All the levels at the magnet and all the musical levels at the magnet and a couple others. So I was an intern for like a year and a half on Friday nights there, just soaking it all in because it was very, I mean, it was such a strong impression. Like that first Friday night watching shows, I can remember what I saw. I remember the first time seeing musical improv that was just like, I know I can do that. Like, I just need to take classes because I know I can get up there and do exactly that. It was just so exciting at that, like, you know. And that's another thing I love seeing about students at the very beginning is that initial kind of like discovery and whoa, and I'm in full for about a year. You know, like that initial kind of like crazy addiction that people get into. Yeah. So I was just like, get through all the classes so I can audition to be on teams. That was the whole thing. Like, get on team, get on team. And I was too, you know, again, too eager. You know, a lot of the notes were like lighter touch, easy, you know, just like. And then later, a couple of class people were like, "Yeah, you're kind of a steamroller. It's like kind of a scene hog." It's like, "Oh, yeah, sorry." I was just very eager to get out and show and try to get better and all that kind of stuff. So I very much sympathize with all the too big energy people or the steamroller people. It's like, yeah, you know, you're just so excited to get out there.
How do you work with people when you see that in person or on Zoom? How do you work with people to kind of, I guess, learn from? I want to say learn from your experiences, because in improv there are no mistakes, right? You're really just is there someone? Didn't someone say that? Maybe it's on a billboard somewhere in
Yeah, it's kind of an oversimplification. I mean, like, I don't know. I think there are mistakes, but that's mostly just like saying something really insensitive, like, you know,
yeah.
just being totally crass. That's a mistake on a stage. But as far as just being too big, I always just, you know, if I say I'm that way and I tell about it, then generally that disarms them, as opposed to like, hey, you're being too big, stop that. It's just like, hey, I was that way. So it's just, and then I explain it's about moderating the instrument. You know, it's like you're just playing too loud. If you just turn it down a little, you'll be totally fine. So
What are some other things that you experienced, whether when you were a beginner or when you see people now that are either just beginning or getting started? Like, what are some things that you see and ways that people can kind of quickly learn and get better?
sure. Um, I would say one thing that I notice a lot more now is people's hesitation to follow through on their ideas or try things out. They'll kind of throw something out there and it doesn't immediately get a reward or great response, so they then get scared and back away. So like that thing of kind of dancing around a choice, I can definitely see it in their faces and just say like, hey, I noticed, you know, you seem to try something and then back away from it. You know, like I'm able to read people a lot better, even on the screens. Like many a class, and I'm just able to really sense how people are feeling in those scenes as actors. Like whenever it comes to being scared, somebody else says something messed up, but they don't want to be impolite, so they just kind of let it go. Like those kind of moments with students, I'm able to recognize.
What do you recommend when someone says something a little bit? When you said someone says something messed up, and then they let it go, like what do you mean?
For instance, if you and I are in a scene and we're a married couple, and I'm like, yeah, I've been sleeping with your sister for a long time. It's great. And you're like, anyway, let's continue planning the birthday party. Because that's the actor being like, oh, that's weird. I don't know how to respond. Never mind. So like those tiny little moments like that, I can see, people feeling that, and just then I get to say like, you don't have to be quiet. If they said something that you would never put up with in real life, you can respond to that and say so. Like the yes of yes and sometimes gets misinterpreted as like literally whatever your partner does, say yes. So even if your partner's like, hey, drink this and let's go beat that person up. Like you just don't have you don't have to be like, well, yes and. Like you can say no. You can because that's when the audience gets uncomfortable as well. Because like, oh man, let's say I have a partner on the stage who's a woman and I say something offensive. It's like the audience will get uncomfortable if they let it go. The only way everybody feels okay about uncomfortable moments is if it's called out, addressed, just said like, hey, that was messed up. And then everybody goes, yeah, that is messed up. And then we can all move forward.
Have you noticed a difference in between? I guess there has to be a difference, but how do you, when you perform now and you're on Zoom, you don't get that immediate audience reaction. Like if you're doing really great, you don't get that big dopamine hit. And if you're not doing great, it's kind of, it's more quiet, right? So how do you manage to know how you're doing when you're doing a show versus on Zoom versus in person?
Yeah, you're just taking a guess. I just kind of, I got to a place in the past few years performing wise where I pretty much feel like if I'm on the stage, it'll be okay. If I'm in a scene, it's going to be good. Or, like even if it's not my best, it'll be fine. My worst is very watchable. So I just assume that whenever I'm in a Zoom scene, it's going well. It's not, I don't think everything's awesome or taken off. I'm not unrealistic, but I just assume that my skills at this point are at least watchable or interesting enough. I know I'm not bailing on choices. I know that I'm looking to have more fun than I've looked to have. It's like, I just tend to believe that it's working out. It's not, but you can't really tell from the inside either. It's like without the audience, I hope it's fine. I definitely don't go and watch like last week's musical improv show. I'm like, I'll never watch that, but I assume it was fine.
Why wouldn't you watch it?
There's just no need at this point. Unless I was checking something like whenever I sing, does it match up with the music? Like, is the piano and vocal match? Otherwise, it's just me being like, oh look, I'm enjoying this, or I don't really need to look at the film quite as much anymore. It would be different if it was like we're putting up a sketch show and it opens in 2 weeks and here's a recording of that. Like that's going to be valuable to look at to try to fine tune. But as far as an improv show, no real interest, I guess, in watching something that I just did, unless something crazy happened. Then maybe.
How do you handle? I know you said this earlier, but like, have you ever had something really crazy happen at a show? Like, if you had someone like completely go off the rails, or like one of your stage partners like froze and couldn't do anything. Like, what's some like or maybe like a wild kind of crowd? I know you talk about you have on your website like how to deal with like different kind of crowds. Like, you just talk us through at least one time when something like wild just happened.
Sure. There are so many, like anytime I start to open that door of stories, there's just always like, I've had so many insane, I can't believe we're trying to do a comedy show right now because of the circumstances. Like a lot of them are just where the venue is not appropriate. So in New York, there was a company called Chicago City Limits, and it moved to New York in 79. So it was kind of like this older institution, but once UCB came along, it was suddenly just passe, short form. So I started working for them at the they're still around in name, but like they're just barely hanging on, and they have been for like a decade. But I started working for them, and they did all these private shows all over town, very tied in because the owner is a Jewish guy with Jewish community. So we do all these events. It's like this is at a dinner at a traditional like what do you call it, Orthodox Jewish wedding. We're all on a stage. We can't have any women perform with us because we can't touch. So it's just 4 guys, and there's one microphone, and so we're all improvising into the microphone, and the people are just like eating their food after a wedding. Like who planned this? And that's the thing. There's like a million of those. So private birthday parties in some guy's basement. His rich wife is like, "Oh, my husband loves comedy. He'll love it when an improv team comes over and they do an hour-and-a-half long show for me and our kids." It's like those type of situations. Just like, this should not be a comedy show.
Comedy show for a family.
Yes, yes. Many a situation like that. And you get paid, and you're eating the food in a room next door until it's time to go on. And you're like, coming on. It's just ridiculous. Situations like that. Venue matters so much. So in New York, if you're at a bar in the corner and people are watching the TV, and it's like, those are the situations where it's like, people aren't here to watch the show. So that leads to a million stories. On the cruise ship, man, people, they have these things called all-you-can-drink packages, or what, unlimited drink packages. You pay $60 a day. You can drink all day, all you want. So it leads to very drunk audiences. And so there's this whole other 10 or 20 stories that are just like, yeah, there was a time we were doing a show, short form show, and it was going great. But then we did Oscar-winning moment, and it was okay. But this guy gets up, and he's like, "Hey, that wasn't fucking funny. Hey, that wasn't funny." Just like those kind of situations where it's like, man, this is great. In Chicago, Second City, those late night shows, there's a show called After Hours, Fridays and Saturdays at 11. Same situation. A room of 300, and there are 4 bachelorette parties. And it's like, I call it riding the bull, where it's just like, man, if we let them realize they have power, this could get out of control. And I've never, in that situation, been where it's out of control, but definitely many a moment where it's like, this is awkward. We shouldn't be here right now. A lot of audiences saying inappropriate things. It's like, in Winnetka, probably the worst suggestion I've ever gotten in a big room. It was like wealthy white Winnetka doing a scene. My partner's an African-American male. Say, "Hey, can we get a relationship that 2 people have, like doctor-patient or 2 astronauts? Master and slave." "Sir, as much as I would love to do master and slave, we're not going to do that, ever. So could we get another," like those moments. At first, when I was younger, I just didn't know. It was just fluster, your face gets red. You're like, so for instance, on the ship, when that guy spoke up and was like, we all puffed up our chests. We're like, yeah, real clap, like, now I know better. Now I know you never let them throw you off your game and lose your cool, that you just dress them down. That when you're on the stage, you have the power, so you don't have to be like, "Hey, shut up." You just be like, "Hey, sir, look at all these other people. By a round of applause, how many of you want to see us continue the show?" Like you can use them and all sorts of tricks, but at the beginning you don't know. So you just kind of freak out a little bit, but yeah.
What would be, so you're in New York. I want to go back to,
Yeah.
well, actually, let's talk about Oscar-winning moment. What is an Oscar? I know, because I think sometimes,
Yeah.
I know what you're saying exactly. What is the Oscar-winning moment?
Oscar-winning moment is a short-form game in which we are improvising a scene, and at some point, the host says, "Freeze! Eric is now going to deliver his Oscar-winning moment." So the idea would be that we're about to see the scene that won you the Oscar, or the monologue, or whatever. So each actor takes their turn doing a dramatic monologue in the middle of the improv. So sometimes it doesn't lead to big belly laughs. Sometimes people, do a thing and it's just like, wow, that was dramatic. And people are confused.
What are some other short form games that you like to, whether it be a beginner or just someone in your class, what are some of the games you like to play?
I like the scenic ones. So there's Scene Tag and Foursquare. Those are the short form games that I always use with beginners because they're the most like long form improv. They're just scenes. Scene tag, we have 2 actors here, 2 actors here, 2 actors here, 6 on stage. We're watching scene 1 at a certain point. Middle pair claps, and we're watching them. And then we're watching them. And it's just scenes, but you're bouncing back and forth. 4 square, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 2 in front, 2 in back. And we go shift left, shift right, that sort of thing. But ultimately, we're always watching a 2-person scene. So those are my favorites because it's just scenes, just more scenes. Sex with Me is always fun. I mean, in front of a rowdy audience and stuff, like, I don't know. And I've done most of those joke games so many times that what I most enjoy is just doing things to make myself laugh. So it's like you get beyond, you hear the same suggestions over and over. And so rather than just go to the same jokes, you just try to find new things. And that can be kind of creative. Because short form, what I don't like about it is they can be so routine and easy that it's not a challenge. So a lot of them are like guessing games, like charades almost, like party quirks. I'm the host of the party, and 4 guests are going to enter. And I was out of the room whenever they got their identities, so now I have to guess from their behavior who they are. Like, that's entertaining as hell for an audience, because I don't know. And they love that I don't know, and I have to guess, and I get it wrong sometimes. But for me, the actor, it's just like, not that great a challenge.
We did some of those. So I did the A through E in 2019, and then at the end we had a couple shows, and we would do same thing. And it was interesting. I ended up I was the mayor, and I had to guess what my crime was. And I was like chewing gum on the subway with Celine Dion.
Yep.
And people loved it, but it was actually funny when I was doing it. I was actually like, I don't know, maybe I sold it, but I wasn't as into it because we've done it a few times. And it was like, the Celine Dion part was kind of a nice twist. So I was like, oh, I like Celine. What are some differences? Like, what's the difference between a short form and a long form game? I mean, obviously you can tell there's some difference, but how would you break it down for someone who's like, let's say they want to go to you for teaching, or they're like, hey, I want to do Second City, Ross is teaching this improv, like intro class. Like, what do you normally like? How do you start people off? Like, do you start them with short form? Do you start with long form? Like, how do you view those two different kinds of improv?
Yeah, I mean, all my experience melts together, and I just tend to teach the people in the room, mainly based on how I learned at the Magnet. Because at the Second City, their curriculum is just it's cobbled together over generations of teaching. So it's not very instructive as far as a route. So I just tend to teach what I want. So in a level 1 class, like day 1, I get them to do scenes. They're extremely short. They're like 20 seconds, but I get that out of the, like that's what improv is to me. Whether short form or long form, it's scenes. So if I was explaining it, like I tend to think of my grandma. So if I was explaining improv to my grandma, I'd say it's like theater. It's a scene with characters, right? You've seen Oklahoma or musicals, like just like that, except instead of a script that we've all memorized, we're making it up. But otherwise, that's how I get people to understand is like it's like a scene in a movie or a scene in a theater. And once you get that, then when you get people in the room who are a little nervous, you can be like, it's just like playing pretend, it's making up lies, like lots of different ways you can get people to not think about the fact that they're performing something with no safety net in front of people. Like you just have to distract them from that fact, because otherwise those eyes, man, people's nerves take over. So you just have to I try to make them comfortable and then go, see, look at that. You all did scenes. Like at Second City, the first show isn't until after level 3. Like in New York, Magnet level 1, there's a class show at the end. Like I just try to steer more in the terms of let's get to scenes, let's get to improv, because that's what translates to other theaters. Because one problem with Second City is that a student might take all the classes there, go across town to the Annoyance or IO, and they'd be like, whoa, this is more serious. Like that other place is kind of a joke compared to this. I like to teach the class so that if they go to the other place, they won't feel totally like, whoa, all we learned was party quirks and Dr. Know-It-All. Like, that doesn't apply here. So that's my whole thing is practical. If I was the student in this class, what would I want? That kind of thing.
What have you seen in in terms of the different theaters? I know you teach at Magnet, you teach at Second City, you have your own business. What are like how would someone go about figuring out like what like how the different theaters operate? Like you said, you found a DVD and you're like, oh, that name sounds familiar. I'll do that. Like if you were just told, if you were me, well, not me because I'm obviously talk to you, but if you're just someone who's like, I don't know even where to start, like what would you recommend besides going to rosstaylorteaching.com? Did I get the website right?
Yeah,
Is it Ross
absolutely.
Taylor Teaching?
RossTaylorTeaching.com.
I type in RO in my browser and it goes right there. I'm a couple clicks away from signing up for a class.
You know, people are generally familiar with the show Whose Line Is It Anyway? That was a helpful thing as far as like, oh, I kind of get it. If I was recommending that you watch something, there's a group called TJ and Dave, and there's a documentary that they did called Trust Us, This Is All Made Up, and it just films a show that they did in New York and the day, walking around New York leading up to it. So it's like an hour and a half, and the show is an hour, and then there's 30 minutes before of just them walking around, killing time before their show. And that, I mean, it's not like the best show I've ever seen, but that's like, yeah, that's a good example of long form improv. Or I know that there's another one I haven't seen yet, but I assume it's similar with the Middleditch and Schwartz on Netflix.
A lot of my friends have told me to watch that.
Yeah, I mean, in person is the best. If you can go, and that's the thing that's kind of cool is like if that person is near any major city or any place with a college, there's an opportunity to go see it in person. And that is the ideal way to see it because then you'll experience the magic. Watching a recording is just not the same as being in the room, seeing people make choices on the spot. Because that tends to be like the thing that's hard to explain when you go home after that show, where you're like, this guy walked in, and it made sense when you were there.
Yeah, you kind of had to be there for that one.
Totally, yeah.
What about theater selection? Like if someone's like, because now, right now, we're all doing Zoom. So outside of RossTaylorTeaching.com, what are some other, and by the way, just so everyone knows, all 50, 100 people listening to this, not being paid for this. This is I love what you do. So this is it's my ode to you. But I also want people to take that plunge. I think that, and I don't know how you feel about this. Maybe it's a good segue, but like laughter, especially now, is just so helpful. Like one of the reasons I like doing the classes is I always come out of it in a better mood. And I've never had one improv class where I've went in some improv classes in some bad moods. I've had long days at work. I've had significant other issues. And I've always walked out of there with a smile on my face. And I don't know if this point's actually going anywhere, but it just seems like a lot of people, just give it a shot. Like I know so many people that they're funny. I mean, I think everyone can be funny. I truly believe anyone can be funny. They just have to take a shot. So taking it back to where I think I was going with this, this is the part you don't see when I'm in class. I mean, I say things in class. This is like how my mind works. It's very confusing to me. How do you choose? Like, how do you choose theater? I mean, we have online theaters, right? Like, have you experimented with any international theaters? Is there anything going on in other parts of the country you think is kind of cool? Or are you kind of keeping it more like, I really do love what I'm doing at the Magnet, and, it sounds like you have a little bit of a love-hate with Second City, which I don't know. I don't want to quote you on that, but maybe a little bit.
Sure. Well, at the beginning, I say it doesn't matter where you take classes because any class will be good at the beginning. Once you've taken a few, then your taste might guide you somewhere. Be like, oh, I like this style, or I like this, or whatever. But at the beginning, any improv class anywhere will be helpful in a number of ways. Number one, it's awesome to do scenes and it's fun, and getting laughs is fun and it makes you feel better. But I tend to find it has two ways of benefiting you off stage. Number one, you're a better listener because you spend so much time trying to understand your partner's ideas. So it tends to make you just tune in more to what someone's communicating. And then it also makes you more confident in your own ideas. Whenever you put something out there, your partner gets on board with it, the audience laughs, it's just affirming, and you feel better about yourself. So it's like anywhere you take a class, those will be the benefits usually. I agree with you that anybody can be funny. I would say that there's like a tiny little subsection of people who there's certain obstacles with awareness and things that prevents them from interacting well. But everybody can be funny. It just has to be natural.
Yeah.
It's getting us to not try. Because man, when we try, we're not funny. Whenever it's like, all right, here comes the comedy. Usually,
Yeah.
what follows is like, oh man, you're trying, and that's hard to teach. Because whenever you come in, you're like, awesome, improv, say whatever. I'm gonna be hilarious. So over time, you learn that like the more you relax, the funnier you are, and you see that in classes too. Is all that happens over time is people get more comfortable, and then the funny kind of emerges. Just like in real life, whenever you're not trying so hard, you're usually very funny, and everybody can get a laugh usually. But also to say, you know, there are people who don't have a perfect improv experience, and it's like, well, it's not for everybody. In the same way that like bowling isn't for everybody, it's like the hobby that you choose. This may not be it, but it tends to be at least exciting because you're trying something new. I used to feel a similar thing teaching guitar, where it was like people would just get so emotional because they didn't realize that in the middle of their life they would learn something new that would like feel good, and they're just like, thank you so much, like it was me. But anybody could be in the seat that I'm in. It's just that this thing is so amazing. It's like the same with improv, where people are just like, Ross, and it's like, well, I'm happy to be here, I do a fine job, but it's improv. Really, really, that's the thing that we're all keyed up about. I'm very anti-guru. As far as the Second City thing, well, it's a business. It's like everybody who's ever worked there has got a little bit of grievance, and also is able to say like, man, this opportunity and this thing were awesome. These parts didn't work out as well. It's like, everybody feels that way. So, yeah. It's a weird thing too, because it's like a big hallowed institution, but everybody's got grievance. Everybody.
Yeah. I remember you walk in, it was like the first day I was doing it. I remember I posted on Instagram. I was like, my name was on the sheet for the attendance, and someone commented there, oh, I just wanted to like do that. And you walk in, you see like Farley's face,
Yeah.
and you see there's Faye, and there's Tim Meadows, and then eventually you figure out there's like another floor, and then there's like other theaters in back, and you see like some like who was like Corral was a teacher and all that stuff. And then by like class 4, everyone's like, ugh, $350.
Well, it's a little bit. I don't personally believe that any theater should take credit for any superstar's career. Like, it'd be like LeBron James's high school being like, we made him. Like, that guy was getting no opportunities until Akron High came along. It's like, well, I think that Chris Farley and Tina Fey hopefully, we're going to find a way to the top anyway. But that is a selling point, because every other theater does the same thing, and they all, it's like UCB used to do that a lot at the Pit in New York. The guy, owner Ali has the pictures on the wall with him and his famous friends. It's a selling point. It's like someday when you get famous, I'll be like, yeah, Eric, one of my school, you want to be like Eric? You want to be famous?
I would do anything if I ever become famous for you to just start zooming in like this and say,
Totally.
you want to be famous? You would be a fantastic, I know you said your family was fairly religious. You would have made a really good cult leader.
I know. Well, I mean, I think about it often because, like, when I was growing up, you gotta understand, like, I live with my grandparents, and we live next door to the church that my family built in the 40s. So like going all the time.
Yeah.
So in my community, the only use for the arts is if you're in church, like singing and performing and all that stuff. It's useful there, but outside of that context, totally useless. So I think that everybody in my family and the church was like, Ross is so talented. I can't wait till he becomes like a servant of God and just spreads. It's like, oh no, he's going off to the city. Like, what's he doing? It's incredible. But now I do think, like, because I've taught Sunday morning improv classes, and it was like, man, I want my great grandpa who founded this church. Like, I wonder what he at the. And it's like, all right, we're going to play some freeze tag, everybody. It's like, this is my church. This is the thing that I preach, performing. But if you don't go along with it, like, I don't make you feel bad. So my church is like not going to come down on you if you don't get on board. I'll be like, yeah, cool. Maybe go do a stand-up or a craft or something.
Well, I do think too, if you're really comparing it, I think you're way more affordable than a church too, because if we're talking drop-in
Sure.
classes, $20 a week, I feel like the church is trying, or was it like you're supposed to give like 10%? Like that's not. I mean,
Yeah.
you're really underselling your donations.
Well, again, appealing to me as the student. Like, I
Yeah.
can't afford much. So, let me say, RossTaylorTeaching.com is in the black for the year, but it's not a thriving business. And it's not, it's like, I don't imagine someday I'm going to be teaching 7 drop-ins a week. It's like, no. This is a fun, awesome, another income stream. That's what I'm all about. It's like anything to make money, but.
What about, now let's talk about, you're very artistic. I mean, on the website you can talk about, you can take improv, you can learn guitar. You're also you're a sports buff. I mean, you clearly dropped it when you dropped that, talked about the LeBron James Akron reference. Can we talk a little bit about your side project with the Cardinals?
Yeah, man. So growing up in Missouri, Grandpa was a big Cardinals fan, Cardinals family. So St. Louis Cardinals have been my team since I was a kid. I had this weird impulse right before this season started to watch every game like a sports writer and just follow the games with the idea that I might write a book at the end of it. And so it's just become this thing that I'm working on. I got like 40,000 words. It'll eventually, like, I reached out to publishers and there's one who's like, yeah, once you have a sample, send it. So it's like, it may lead somewhere, but I'm also totally, and I was this way with my songs too, totally okay with just creating the thing and the world never seeing it. I would love to share because there are other Cardinal fans and all the Cardinals books are a little boring. It's like, it would be cool to write about a year where they didn't win the championship and things were kind of weird all year. Like,
Yeah.
I think it could be a cool angle. And most of all, it would please myself as a 7-year-old kid. Like, if I could have known that I was going to write a Cardinals book someday, I'd have been like, yeah, that's awesome. Awesome guy.
I mean,
Because I wanted to, before acting, there was a short period of time where the 3 things I've ever wanted to be: baseball player, sportscaster, actor. So in my middle school, I was like big into watching SportsCenter. I wanted to be a SportsCenter anchor so bad.
who are your favorites?
Keith Olbermann and Dan Patrick were my guys
I love
in the mid 90s. And
Yeah, you wake
yeah,
up super early and Sports
Yep.
Center was on at 6 a.m. and because okay, we're close in age. They used to have that. I'm trying to picture it like this. They always had Kobe at like young Kobe was always part of like that beginning. I remember he would always dunk, and I wanted to be a sportscaster too. I don't know if there's any correlation between theater and that, but so talk about like what's like an interesting story from the book or something that you found when you were writing it that like was there like a theme from like the season you thought was kind of interesting, or like how, like, are you writing this as like a satire?
No, this is so in the past few years, there's been more biographical elements coming into the work that I do. So prior to like 3 years ago, I just wanted to fit in with everybody else and really didn't want to get into where I'm from or my background. And so that kind of changed because you moved to Chicago, and Second City's all about who are you as a performer. There are 15 other white guys here. How are you a little different? And that's where you start to get into your own background and be like, oh, maybe I am a little bit different. Oh, actually, kind of unique for the comedy world. Not unique for St. James, Missouri, but for people in comedy, very unique. So in this book, there's just a lot of, if all I did was write about what happened, boring. It's like, here's my background, here's why I care about this. A lot of themes as far as like this year, how all the leagues have reacted to the same stuff. So how did they all deal with COVID? How did they all deal with Black Lives Matter? One thing that I really stumbled upon was how much time is wasted to watch 3-hour games. 60 of those games was just like, I can't do this anymore. I'm force feeding myself at this point. I can't imagine a whole year of 162 games. I can't imagine 30 years of, if you're not getting paid. watching that much sports is bad for you, bad for your relationships, bad for your life. Like the amount of time, it's like that's one thing I really stumbled upon was this is such a consuming thing. Like I can totally understand families that hate football because their dad watches every, it's like that is such a time suck. That's a big thing that I stumbled upon because my girlfriend, we've been together almost 8 years, and I first brought it up. I was like, I think I'm going to try this thing where I watch every baseball game and I write about it. She's like, okay. And she watched the first couple, just parts of it, and then no more. Like, I was like, oh, God, this could really cause problems if somebody was like, no, I have to be a diehard fan, and a diehard fan watches every game, every play. It's like, I've done my time. After I write this thing, I think it has to do with my grandpa. I think it has to be like a resolution of like, and now I don't have to be a super fan anymore. I've done my time. They won a couple championships in my lifetime, and I feel okay just casually paying attention because, like, man, it's a lot of time. It's consuming. And it's so, when you watch a 4-hour game in which your team loses by like 6, what are you doing with your life? Yeah. But some other guy could be like, hey, genius, improv. Like, how many hours have you spent doing that? It's like, whatever you choose. I try not to be snooty about it. But boy, yeah. I also like putting it all together, like as far as where's my little space in this big timeline of life, like this team that's been around for over 100 years, and here are the stars, and here's my grandpa's group of stars, and here's my mom's group, and here's mine, and oh, you see where all these people have their lifespan and they end, and oh, you see who's gonna die next, and oh, I see where I'm going. Like you have this thought of mortality, that thing that happens when the players are younger than you, like. Now I'm 36, going to be 37 in July, so I'm as old as the oldest players. It's like interesting to get old with these things and just feel differently about the same sport. Like whenever I was a kid, it was just about, wow, Michael Jordan he can dunk. And now it's like, what an interesting thing. Like, thinking about it in a larger context, just a new way to waste time.
Went from
I will finish that book at some point. So hopefully someday, a couple years from now. I had tentatively called it the COVID Cardinals, but whenever I did that, a bunch of people reacted very negatively. Whenever the whole team got sick with COVID, they were like, what's with this fear-stirring, website name? I was like, oh, I chose that before the season. I just thought it was like a funny nickname because they had this team called the Gas House Gang in the 30s. It's like, oh, an alliterative, the COVID Cardinals, that's cool. But then they all got COVID.
Who yelled at you?
Oh, internet people. I was posting my coverage of the games to Facebook groups because Cardinals, like, man, they're Facebook people. There's like, that's another thing I get into is like this particular team and their fans. Man, they are Midwestern and shoot from the hip, and just like no complainers. Too many whiners, and then other people are like, love that bird, love those birds, love, it's very simple. Like my grandma, it's a bunch of my grandma on the Facebook, the Cardinals pages. And so some of them are like, you need to stop being disrespectful. If you were a real fan, I was like, man, nobody can tell me I'm not a fan.
I've watched 60 games from start to finish, and you're going to call me?
Oh, yeah, man.
Yeah.
Please.
Are you kidding me? Well, I think that you also hit it on the head without saying it. That's why people drink heavily at baseball games, because they're just boring.
Now this is one of the loves of my life, is playing softball every summer. It's like, I love the active. It's less fun to just watch. Oh, and in Chicago, you play, because you're in Illinois, like you played the barehanded 16-inch softball.
I did. I had what team was I on? I played once, and it was like a work league. I didn't play baseball growing up. I watched it. It was funny. I thought it was my two things. I thought baseball was too boring, and I thought Cub Scouts was stupid. And as I got older, or no, and I didn't, and I kind of dabbled in golf. But now that I'm older, all my friends do summer softball. They golf all the time, and they buy houses and they like work on things. Now I'm currently in my parents' basement, so clearly that hasn't happened yet here. But fingers crossed one of these days. I am moving to Rockford in a couple weeks, so the studio will change. People, this couch will have a different background. The wall will probably be a little bit older, and it'll be about 80 miles west. But yeah, those skills that would have been built from playing baseball, golf, and learning to tie a rope would have been super useful for life. And like every day, there's like one reminder. It'll be like a group text, and someone will be like, "Oh, hey, you guys want to go golf?" And then they'll be like, "Oh, Vern, oh, you could come too." Like, oh, yes. And then I'll be like,
Yeah.
I'm not. And they're all like decent now because they've been playing for like 20 years. Where I was like, nah, I'm not gonna play after 14 much. And I'm also the guy who I have one friend, and I'm seeing him this weekend, and I love this guy to death. And one day I will stop disappointing him, but he like gives me things. He's like, "Hey, I have an old golf bag. You should have it. Oh, there's balls in it. You could use those. Hey, I got a new driver. Would you like the old one?" Like all the just like they're like I think the guy's eventually just gonna give me a full set, and at that point it's either I go play with him or we're not friends anymore. He
Yeah.
hasn't explicitly said that, but I'm assuming it's gonna come down to that point. But all those like skills that you learn younger, it's like they really do come in handy when you're old, especially in Chicago. Like you just hit it on the head. Everyone is like playing volleyball, they're playing softball, they're doing something. And if you have none of those skills, it's really hard to be between the age of like 24 and 38. I mean, you can
Yeah.
just wait for people and go to a bar afterwards, but that's
Well,
not.
we could kind of full circle here because there's like a window of time. It's the same as if people come to improv at 50 and have never performed at all versus someone who did some theater in high school and then comes to it at 30. It's like that little experience is so beneficial. So like for me, tennis, man, like I move side to side like a champ, but that serve, I didn't do it as a kid and it looks awkward. Sometimes in softball, you'll see these guys come in and we're like, whoa, this guy's shredded. They're going to destroy it, but they've never swung a bat. So they're just like, ugh, just like
Yeah.
flailing. It's like those key windows. Man, I wish, it'd be cool to be able to tap into and get better at a thing starting right now.
But to really bring it full circle, even if you don't do theater and things like that when you're younger, you can learn comedy at
Yeah, you
any
can.
age.
You can. Same with
And
guitar. I mean, these things seem like far away, but if you just begin right now, you can absolutely learn new things. You can get better at softball. You can get better at golf. It's like that seems like an invitation to you to play more from
yeah,
your friend.
I won't. What all right, so RossTaylorTeaching.com, you can do so what and you brought this up earlier and I should have stopped you. What is a drop-in class?
A drop-in class is just a 2-hour class that anybody can take, and it's it's the 2-hour commitment. Um, my only prerequisite is that you've done an improv scene ever before. So if you're a total beginner, I would suggest the Magnet Theater or Second City or some other theater that's offering online classes or in-person classes eventually. But if you have ever performed, you can absolutely drop in. $10, 2 hours, and it's every week.
And then you also have group classes. Is that more how does that work?
The group classes, I'm not sure if I'm going to try those again
Okay.
until it seems like people are going to sign up. They were going to be 4 weeks, $80. Again, just like affordable. And those were kind of more specialized. It's just hard to get, without investing a ton of money to get strangers' eyes upon my stuff. I'm happy with the people who find my class. I would always love to have more, but I very much just follow whatever the opportunity is. So it's like if people were to stop signing up for drop-ins, I'd stop teaching them and find some other thing. It's like not going to make or break me, but I do like having a space that is just mine, where I don't feel compelled to cover what the school wants, or I don't know. It's just because one other thing about those theaters is the students that come through, they want to get somewhere at those theaters, and so they're thinking about those things. But in my drop-in, nobody's going to be on a team. There's no anything besides pure, just like we're here to do improv because we enjoy it, And I do offer some feedback, but ultimately it's just about like enjoying the thing as opposed to getting somewhere with it.
And you know what? In 2021, maybe we can all just take some time and enjoy the gift. Enjoy the gift, right? We're all here. We all survived for the most part, knock on wood. Now you have performed for years, and I don't even know the answer to this. Where can I find your performances online? I was gonna say for a minute I had this thought. I'm like, we're gonna find your pictures online, and I'm like, wait a minute, given what happened earlier, I don't know which pictures. But bad jokes aside, where can we see you online if they see this podcast or hear it and they're like, I need more Ross Taylor?
All right. Well, in the next few days here, let's see, December, I believe it's 19th, 18th, 19th, and 26th. It's Friday and Saturday and another Saturday after Christmas there. TheAnnoyance.com has a Twitch channel, and there's a show called Super Spread the Cheer that I'm a part of, and that's just a cast of like 20, each doing videos from their home, and I've submitted a couple.
Videos.
Yeah, underwear videos. And on Fridays at 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central, I perform musical improv with a group called Premiere. That's through the Magnet Theater, also on their Twitch channel. And at the moment, those are the online things. I don't tend to keep up a bunch of older videos just because, after a while, it's like I have a bunch of videos from before, but I don't really like keep things up too long because I tend to cringe at like looking at them again. In person, working on a musical. Whenever the world reopens, me and my partner, we're trying to do this country western musical. It's like kind of based on Tammy Wynette and George Jones, kind of like a toxic couple, country music people. So eventually we'll tour that around. That would be the goal for 2021 when things reopen.
Okay. Well, Ross Taylor, and I'm gonna do the outro here, but don't get off quite yet. Although we did go past the hour. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your gift and your story. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Eric.
RossTaylorTeaching.com, and whatever Ross said earlier about